Joining me right now is Florida Congressman Cory Mills, member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. What would you like to see come out of the president's trip in the G7 this week?
Well, I would hope that during this actual summit meeting that the president would start talking more about how we can stop the economic and supply chain resource reliancy on adversarial nations such as China. I also think it's kind of funny, though, that he talks about wanting to avoid the debt ceiling collapse or wanting to try and talk to Republicans about getting a negotiation. But as we careen towards a financial crisis, rather than staying here and prioritizing this and doing this meeting remotely, as he always does with Zelensky or the rest, he actually went ahead and opted to go abroad and just allow it to be through a proxy. So while I'm hopeful that this turns out well and that he can try and in some way not embarrass us on the world stage as he's done since the Afghan botched withdrawal, I'm not hopeful that he will stand his ground when it comes to us being a more dominant force and holding our adversaries accountable, such as China and Russia.
Well, look, we're watching these debt ceiling negotiations, and it certainly feels like Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans have taken an upper hand here. The president says, though, he will not accept any of the Medicaid work requirements in the GOP's debt ceiling plan. House Democrats are still trying to go around McCarthy and the House bill that passed, filing a discharge petition yesterday, an attempt to go around House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and force a vote to raise the debt ceiling with no strings attached. House Minority Leaders Hakeem Jeffries rallying Democrats to support this tactic. I spoke with the Speaker about this yesterday. Here's what he said. Watch.
It's not going to go anywhere. You have to get 218 votes. Look, Republicans sat together. We wanted to work with Democrats. Democrats did not want to work about it, so we passed our own bill that would limit Save Grow. Put work requirements in, only for able-bodied people with no dependents. This is something that President Biden voted for as a senator, that President Bill Clinton signed into law.
So what do you think, Congressman? Right now, there seems to be agreement on the clawing back of COVID-19 funds, as well as potentially a permitting element in this agreement. What are you expecting?
Well, the Speaker's exactly right. You know, you have Joe Biden, who is showing such hypocrisy. He voted for work requirements, but he's also the same guy who voted to actually destroy Medicare and Medicaid on not just 3, but 4 different occasions. You know, anything the Democrats accuse Republicans of is probably because they've actually done it themselves. But when it comes to the clawbacks, yes, this is one of the best debt ceiling increases that we can look at. $1.47 trillion increase. It's a 1-year extension. It allows us to claw back $1.2 trillion in unused funds, to include the $500 billion that Joe Biden circumvented legislators on when he signed the executive orders for the tuition bailout. And so this is allowing us to use COVID money. This is allowing us to use the excess money that was put aside in some of the IRA funding. And this really gets us to a point where we can go back to fiscal year 22 and look at a 1% increase that over time will give us a $4.8 trillion clawback. Now, the bigger part of this, though, Maria, as you know, is H.R. 1, where we would actually be pushing to try and go ahead and get our domestic energy production up. We would look at pushing the REINS Act, which would stop some of the overregulation on businesses, which would allow GDP growth. So this is actually a strategy to not only not default on our nation's debt, but also get us to a position where our GDP can grow and exceed, which as a former business owner, I can tell you, the best way to stop insolvency is to get your account receivables higher than your account payables.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do with this debt ceiling bill.
Well, that's right. And, you know, it's not really going to move the needle in terms of saving money after all of the trillions spent and borrowed under this administration. So I guess the issue gets down to caps on future spending. I'm not sure where the agreement is on that. Have you gotten a sense of whether or not the White House is going to agree to caps on spending in the future?
Well, I haven't heard the White House actually come out with anything that was beneficial to the negotiations. I mean, they continue to say they were willing to negotiate, but as you can see, Biden has demonstrated his priorities by flying abroad rather than addressing American issues. Yeah. And so the Republicans are in solidarity. We are unified, and we are going to stand on exactly what we submitted, not a clean debt ceiling and not what the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is trying to bring to the table.
All right. We'll be watching all of that. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much.
Great to see you. Have a great morning.
And to you, Cory Mills in Florida this morning.